All right. Last time I asked you in your response to get a little bit creative, just like in chapter 61 with the stories that the animals were telling about Ra. So I challenged you to come up with your own story, pretending that you were one of the animals. So it was really fun to read and watch you guys get creative. Today we're going to continue through chapter 63. You might have noticed last time that I stopped, right? And I was talking to you a little bit about what's going to happen. So I want to just kind of set the scene just in case you weren't with us last time. So right now, Bright Bill is telling the story of their migration. And we know that something not so good is going to happen because the humans aren't friendly. So I let you know last time I gave away a little bit of the story, but for good reason, is that the humans are hunters in this scenario. So what we're about to read is that the humans are hunters. So one of them is going to use a weapon, which we obviously know is not the right thing to do, but that's what happens on the farm. So I want to just prepare you that that's what's going to happen, remembering that this is just simply a story. Okay, so prepare. Here we go. All right, so I'm going to pick up with the last line of what I read last time. "You can rest here," said Snooks, as the flock hurried in, "but stay out of sight. The humans aren't as friendly as me." So remember, Snooks is the old cat by the greenhouse. None of us knew what humans were, but we didn't care. We were just happy to be out of the cold. Loudwing was so happy she cried. The flock drank and ate and bathed and slept and stayed out of the way. Snooks showed us where to leave our droppings so they wouldn't be noticed. And for a few days, the greenhouse was our home. Once or twice a day, the robot would go outside and return with a box or a bag, but most of the time she stayed inside and quietly worked on the plants. There was a barn that I just had to explore. It was filled with animals, machines, and piles of straw, and 2 robots. One robot was fixing a broken door when I walked in. She was using a loud spinning tool called a saw. She pushed the saw through a long piece of wood and dust shot into the air. Everything was going smoothly until the saw suddenly lurched forward and sliced right through 3 of the robot's fingers. But she was fine. A minute later, there was a thwip sound, and she popped out a new hand. The other robot worked with the animals, chickens, sheep, pigs, and cows, and they were all in cages. The chickens kept asking me how I got out of my cage. I was explaining to them that I never had one. That's when I heard panicked squawks coming from the greenhouse. I ran back and found that a human discovered the flock. We didn't know what he was saying, but he looked really angry. Longneck tried to defend us. He got in front and spread out his wings and honked, but the human wasn't afraid. He pulled out a shiny stick and pointed it at Longneck. Snooks hissed, "Look out! He's got a rifle!" Suddenly, a bright beam of light shot out, and Longneck slumped to the floor. He was gone, Mom. The flock was so scared. We fluttered around and honked and knocked over plants, but the human kept moving toward us, pointing at us. So I pecked the button to open the door, and we ran outside, into the cold, and flew away as fast as we could. Without Longneck, the flock needed a new leader. Everyone wanted me to lead. I didn't know what to do. So I started by repeating Longneck's words. I squawked, "We are geese, and geese keep going." Then I pointed, and the flock spread out behind me. The weather had us all turned around, and nobody knew which way to go. So I just led us straight south. We saw robots and humans and buildings, but we didn't stop. We knew we were way off course when we saw the ocean again, but at least it was a little warmer by the water. So I decided to follow the coastline for a while. There were more buildings by the coast. Most of them were on land, but some were in the ocean. The ocean buildings were dirty and crumbling and leaning in different directions. There weren't any humans or robots in those buildings, only sea creatures. We saw ships on the water. We saw ships on the land, and we even saw ships in the air. They buzzed through the sky like giant dragonflies. Then we reached a place called a city, where thousands of buildings and robots and humans and ships all lived very close together. When we stopped to rest on a roof, we met a friendly pigeon named Graybeak. She had grown up there, so she knew everything about the city. She flew us over towers and under bridges and kept us away from all the buzzing airships. And everywhere we went, there were robots. Some of the city robots were just like you, Ma, but others crawled on 6 legs or rolled on wheels or slid up and down the side of buildings. Some robots were small, others big. They moved things and cleaned things and built things and did every job you can think of. Graybeak brought us down to a ledge on the side of the building and told us to look through the windows. Inside was a family of humans, and they had a Roz robot. When we looked into the buildings, we saw other humans with robots too. Every human seemed to have a robot. I told Graybeak about you, Ma, and she wanted to show us one last place. We flew out to the edge of the city to a really big building called a factory. Graybeak brought us to the roof windows, and we looked down into the factory and saw machines building sparkling heads and torsos and limbs. The factory was building robots. A machine held up a robot torso and put on 2 legs under it. They snapped in place. It put feet under the legs. It snapped arms into the shoulders and snapped hands into the arms. A head was snapped onto the top, and the robot was finished. Ma, the robot looked just like you. I think the factory is where you were built. I wanted to watch more robots being built, but it started to snow again, so we had to say goodbye to Graybeak and continued flying south. We saw fewer robots and humans and buildings and ships. The air became warmer and the snow disappeared. We started seeing other flocks of geese in the sky, so we followed them to the middle of a wide grassy field where there was a lake and hundreds of other geese. We had finally reached our wintering grounds. After all we'd been through together, our flock became very close. We kept to ourselves, eating and resting and remembering the geese we'd lost. But after a few weeks, we began to mingle with the others. We met geese from all over the world. Every flock had lost geese along the way. A few flocks didn't make it at all. Before we knew it, the early spring flowers were poking up, and it was time to fly home. We followed the usual migration route north. We flew over fields and forests and hills, but we didn't see signs of humans and robots. And that was fine with us. Eventually, we reached the ocean, and then our island, and then our pond, and then, Mom, I saw you. Chapter 64, The Special Robot. After Brightbill told the story of his winter, he and his mother sat in silence and thought. They thought about poor Longneck. They thought about farms and cities and factories. They thought about Roz and where she truly belonged. So remembering that the island isn't her natural habitat, right? So now Brightbill just got exposed to her real habitat, right? She's coming from the factory and all robots are in these cities. So where does she really belong is going to become a question as we continue on. Then after a while, Roz told Brightbill her own winter story. She spoke of long hibernation and how she had been awoken to find the nest caved in around her. She spoke of blizzards and frozen animals, of the many lodges she had built and the one that caught fire. But she mostly spoke about all the new friendships she had made. I used to think that you were the only animal who would ever care about me, she said to her son. I worried that without you around, I would be alone again. But I wasn't. In fact, I made new friends all on my own. I think the other animals actually might like me. Of course they like you, Ma, squawked the goose. You're the most likable robot I've ever seen. And I've seen a lot. It was true. Brightbill had seen hundreds of different robots that winter, and none were anything like Roz. None of them had learned to speak with animals, or had saved an island from the cold, or had adopted a gosling. As he sat there, watching the robot's animal gestures and listening to her sounds, Brightbill realized just how special his mom really was. Chapter 65 is the invitation. I want you to think for a second, invitation to what? What could it be? What ideas do you have about where this invitation is leading somebody to go? We'll see. Roz was the first to arrive at the next dawn truce. She had an important announcement to make. The robot patiently waited in the great meadow as the sky slowly brightened and the animals slowly gathered, and once everyone was milling around and chatting, Roz began to speak in her perkiest voice. Pardon the interruption, If I could please have a moment of your time. That reminds me at school when Miss Donna comes on the announcement, pardon the interruption, pardon the interruption. The crowd settled down and listened to their robot friend. We made it through a terrible winter. A new generation of youngsters is arriving, and my son Brightbill just returned with his flock. I think we can all agree that there is much to celebrate. So in addition to the dawn truce this morning, I would like us to have another one this evening. We can call it the evening truce, or better yet, the party truce. The crowd began chattering with excitement. I have planned a celebration, Roz continued, and you're all invited. I will take care of everything. Just please meet me back here at dusk. Oh, and I have a surprise. Actually, it's not little, it's quite large. The point is, I have planned a celebration, and I hope to see you all there. Sounds great, Roz, but I'm afraid there's one problem with your plan, said Mr. Beaver, blinking his beady eyes. The moon won't be out this evening, so it'll be too dark for some of us to see. You are half correct, said Roz. Tonight will be moonless, but it will not be dark. I promise. Now, if you will excuse me, I must prepare for our party. I will see everyone back here at dusk. Goodbye. I'm going to pause right there for today, and I want you to think. It's like that inferring skill that I've been teaching you in your one-on-ones. So I'm going to read that quote one more time. You are half correct, said Roz. Tonight will be moonless, but it will not be dark. So what do we know about Roz? And what are our clues from the story about how the moon won't be out, but Roz will make sure that it's not dark? Interesting. Use those inferring detective skills, readers, and we'll be back tomorrow to carry on. Great job listening today. Talk to you soon.